Popcorn Junkies. This is a bit of a surprise, isn't it?
Yay!
In isolation, in quarantine,
discovered.
in whatever. The one thing we couldn't do now, if we wanted to, Mum, is go on a hunt.
True.
The only thing we're hunting for at the moment is vegetables and things like that. So in this coronavirus strange time, a lot of the film studios have released their films straight to streaming, or they've dumped them on various channels for you to be able to purchase. And The Hunt was just out at the cinemas at the point that the lockdown kind of kicked in.
It was. I just missed being able to see it.
And I just missed being able to see it. And because it had landed and I'd heard interesting things about it, I thought, let's check it out. So we checked it out. Now, there's a bit of history to the release of this film because it was originally scheduled to be released on September 27th, 2019, quite a while ago. However, the Dayton and El Paso mass shootings nudged Universal into delaying it because, of course, it's a film about gratuitous shooting. And it is about gratuitous shooting.
And stalking
and hunting and all that malarkey. So I think it was an act of sensitivity. The weird thing about all these things is that as soon as a studio does that, it's almost one of the best press moves for a film.
Of course,
so it's kind of got a bit of kind of sort of inadvertent press from that scheduling shift. And then of course it lands in the cinema when it does, and then a pandemic lands. So in a way, this film was never really meant to be seen. It's a very political film. Insofar as it's about the left and the right of America.
Yeah.
And yet...
It could be called confusing, I think, in that I was confused to begin with. It took me a while to work out what side people were on.
Yeah, and I was all the way through it. We'll scroll back to what the premise of the film was. I was always struggling to work out and was really nuzzling around to work out what the film's position was in terms of what it was trying to tell.
Yeah. Because it starts with that text, doesn't it?
It starts with a text and in and amongst an incredibly affluent group, doesn't it?
Yeah. With a mention of the deplorables.
The deplorables, that's
which at that stage we don't really know
who the deplorables are.
Who they are.
Yes, and then we cut to an aeroplane, don't we, where they're all heading off to somewhere, and then they bring someone out the back, and he's a sort of redneck. They call him a redneck. And then the first moment of extraordinary violence happens. And when that scene happened, it sort of came out of nowhere because this is a Blumhouse production. And Blumhouse for me is one of those film labels that produces a lot of quality stuff like Get Out, The Purge, but it can also churn out a lot of kind of what I call horror fodder.
Oh, okay.
And not necessarily what I'd call inventive B-movie horror fodder.
No,
Just a load of old shit like Happy Death Day.
You always use that as your example.
And what's that other one where they had the stupid grins? You know, Truth, Dare, Lie, Die, whatever it was. Do you know what I mean though? Chuckaway. They do a lot of chuckaway stuff. And I was expecting this to be really chuckaway. And to begin with, it felt quite chuckaway, I thought. It was all a bit kind of, posh interiors, text on a plane, stabbed in the neck with a pen, blood.
You've covered the first.
And that's the first sort of 35 minutes of the film. And what's the premise? The premise, it felt like it was riffing on many other films that we've seen, like The Hunger Games and things like that.
Well, I thought, when I was sort of thinking about reviewing this, and I thought one of my lines will be to people was, if you like The Hunger Games and if you like Killing Eve, you will like this film. Because it sort of morphs from one to the other and back again.
Good reference.
And I mean, Killing Eve not so
much until the end.
The end, but then an importance.
Very important. Yeah. I mean, it becomes a film. So essentially, it's a film about the extreme right and the extreme left. And I think the polite way of describing the hunters, and I think this is quite a good inversion because I think many horror films have gone with the tradition of the redneck being the hunter. If you think of things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, lots of horror films have that sort of, the sort of beaten up sort of redneck kind of deep south Texan weirdos. And they're the nut jobs, and they're the ones usually doing the kind of
from the days of Deliverance, actually.
Yeah, absolutely, from Deliverance. And it's that sort of irrational sort of violence comes from them. And what I quite liked about this actually was the idea that it was parked within, weirdly, an Obama-esque sort of sedate responsibility. They were woke.
Yes.
The killers were woke killers.
Yeah, the people that know what woke means.
And woke being, they're politically correct and they feel like, they're killing people. They want to hunt people or create this sort of sport of hunting people who they're the deplorables because they're right-wing, they're sort of potentially racists, they're rednecks, they're that sort of Trumpian, they're Trumpian sympathisers.
Redneck is always used as a term of abuse.
Yeah.
Always.
And then I got really confused and I thought, okay, so this is kind of, potentially it could be seen as anti-Trump, but then it could just as easily be seen as anti-Democrat.
Yeah. I mean, in the end,
both sides are caricatured.
And this is sort of a weird way to do a review because it's sort of, I'm saying in the end, and it's looking back at the film. I like the fact that it was difficult to work out who people were.
I did.
But maybe that would not suit some people. They'd want a more definitive.
Well, I mean, I'm one of those sort of like, I'm a sort of more Democrat left-leaning individual who likes to see his Republicans as dismissible. And I thought what was clever about this was you never quite knew who to believe what was what, because there was a lot of double bluffing going on. There's that one character, for example, who's alongside her for a lot. And you think, oh, he's on her side, isn't he on her side? But she was an incredibly powerful, strong, the main deplorable, so let's assume she's a Trumpian-like woman. The one who kind of is essentially, it's her surviving the film. I thought she was quite a good... She was a very positive, sympathetic character. She
was, and also I mean, essentially, if the film was saying anything through that character, it was saying, don't judge all people that come from this background. I mean, she says it at one point, doesn't she, in a sort of description of her being brought up. She was clearly the brightest of everybody in it. So in terms of...
And there was that lovely exchange between her and another soldier, or ex-soldier, wasn't there, where they both were on opposite ends of the political spectrum. But they'd both served and that's what they say in America, isn't it? If you've served in any war, then they hold deep respect. So do you think being favourable to the film, do you think it was actively striving to be apolitical?
Maybe.
And did it succeed?
Maybe. Well, because she's such a strong central character, and because for quite a time in the film, I would say 3/4 of an hour, you don't really know who she is or where she is or what side she's on, or do you?
No.
So that's quite a way into the film before you're forced to take sides in a way. And then in the bit, there's that bit of the film where she joins up with that man who seems, quite one of her
sort of Trumpian colleague.
But you sort of felt that was going to be a partnership. And
that sort of twisted off.
It did.
I mean, what I liked about it, what I thought was very good, and the first moment for me where it snagged my interest, one of the actresses in it, Emma Roberts, who we know from American Horror Story. She's an incredibly, she's an incredibly big name in America. Lots of people recognise her and know her and all that kind of stuff. The moment, for me, it had a moment a little bit equivalent to that early scene in Scream where your lead, was it Drew Barrymore, who gets killed in the first 10 minutes. And this is a spoiler review, the film's been out a while, but it was so dramatic.
It was.
What happened to her, that we had the luxury, because we weren't watching it at the cinema, of rewinding it and watching it 3 times.
Which is sort of unbelievably shocking.
Which
made me do a face like this.
Well, your head almost did what Emma Roberts' head did. Which was explode. It was like Scanners, wasn't it? It was like David Cronenberg's Scanners when they suddenly went. And that, for me, meant that this film automatically became quite a bold film.
Bigger than we thought it was.
Because I thought there were a lot of moments where it was really riffing on the Hunger Games, especially that moment where they're all running into the middle of a field and they've all got these gags and they've got to get weaponry.
And they open the box.
And they open the box and there's a pig that comes out. I thought that was all quite fun. I like the pig. And then you had other and I thought, how did you think it dealt with deaths?
Completely casually.
Well, casually, but incredibly dramatically and inventively. I mean, there was one where they stepped on... If you've ever wondered what happens to a body when a mine explodes...
I see what you mean,
Incredibly visceral. So this isn't for the faint-hearted. I mean, for example, Kiki didn't watch this.
No, she couldn't watch it. No, she couldn't watch it.
So I thought it did that thing that Tarantino succeeds at, which is the deaths were arresting and dramatic, unexpected, and they managed to be comic without diminishing the drama of worrying.
Almost cartoon.
And so the film but it's a very short film. It's about 90 minutes, wasn't it?
I thought it was a perfect length.
I thought it was a perfect length too.
I mean, the whole thing is that they're somewhere that they don't know where they are,
which I thought was really clever.
I did too, and I mean, we assumed
they thought they were in Arkansas, didn't they?
And then there's a sort of very sort of. Can't think of a word for them, but they were very good. A couple who were running the local,
like the local gas store. I thought that was a brilliant scene.
It was, and they're so sort of like they're homely and lovely.
They reminded me of the grandparents in Bob Balaban's parents.
I was just going to say they're in those films where you get a sweet old lady and she turns out to be a serial killer. I mean, no, they don't, but in some ways. They're sort of not what they appear.
I thought that scene was particularly powerful.
Because
it was riffing on all...
It was quite... for the film, it's quite an extended scene, so we got to know them and...
Yeah, exactly. And you don't often get that in films now.
No.
You often get a scene which is quite functional, that's just there to get you to the next scene.
Yeah,
and I thought they let us sit with that, the not quite knowing what the setup here was.
Yes.
And I thought, I liked all of the stuff in the film where people were playing parts, and I liked that concept. It reminded me of that Michael Douglas film, The Game, where you've got that bigger, more overarching game at play. You know, it's almost role play.
Yes.
And who can you trust and who can't you trust, and all that malarkey.
Absolutely.
I thought that was good. And then it sort of pushed towards this denouement where Hilary Swank was suddenly made an appearance.
Yeah, don't forget that that's going back in time. I mean, that bit is going back in time, because what we're doing with that bit is setting up the whole first bit, basically. It's how that came to happen.
That's right.
I mean, I found, if anything, when I actually interrogated what they were telling us, I found that more confusing than almost anything.
Yes, I know what I mean. In terms of the time scale and when and who and how, and it was all around the conspiracy theory.
Yeah, and I felt they sort of knew that they'd got Hilary Swank and she's big, and so we knew she was the mistress of dreadfulness and lived in a mansion and sort of had no...
I felt they were kind of, were they trying to at that point sort of, were these characters, they were clearly trying to do the flip sides of the same coin. I thought the fight scenes were really good.
I did.
They impaled each other on the blades of a food processor.
Yeah,
so
that's thereby riffing on...
That's right, and Crystal gets out, the main woman gets out on the airplane, doesn't she?
Of course.
With the rabbit.
Of course.
A bit us, wasn't it? A bit us,
a bit Wonderland. A bit Alice in Wonderland,
what was the point of the film? What was it about?
I thought you were going to say, what was the point of the rabbit? I was going to say,
no. But what do you think the point? What was the film trying to say?
That it's not. It's easy enough to. I don't know if this is what it meant, but there was a sort of quite clever, nice scene, I thought, where in the underground bunker, where they were all making up their minds what to do and how to do it, with the people who were the opposite of the deplorables. I'm just having to think carefully here, where they were trying to talk to each other.
Let's call them the woke hunters.
Yeah, just to have a conversation, and it became impossible because every single thing they said had a
I thought they were absolutely...
racist.
Well, yeah, no, but what they were doing, I thought what the director was doing there
that was very clever.
It was very clever. He was caricaturing wokeness.
Yes,
he was. No one could really say anything. People were recognising that every single thing said you were tripping over the political correctness. Now, you could read that as the whole thing.
Yes.
In a sense. Yes. I think this is where it becomes a dangerous film, potentially, is if it tipped in any one particular way, I think it would potentially tip more favourably towards Trumpian thoughts of caricaturing as ridiculous the political correctness of the woke people, who even in themselves do want to hunt. They want to pull them down. So for me, the film almost became an analogy of how the Democrats have sought to pull Trump down, regardless of whether they're pulling him down on the right terms. They just want to get him.
Essentially, they are in that character and in the script saying, don't judge people by what you've always... The redneck philosophy, don't judge people by...
So do you think, I suppose in that sense, do you think ultimately it is a conservative film? A Republican film? Or are we beating around? What's it called? Chanting at the wrong tree? Running up the wrong tree?
Yeah, I think you're reading too much into it. I mean, a couple of the reviews that I've read, the sort of reviews in papers, have criticised it very much for that.
Well, I've seen criticism for the fact that it's not clear on what it is.
No, but there is the one that I read was that they were saying there is the possibility of that we're supposed to sympathise with that character, and therefore it is a bad thing.
Yes.
Which I didn't actually feel, because I thought, she's great. She's arguing all the way through it with the idea that because you come from this area or wherever, you can't be bright or this, that and the other. And clearly she is. She is, as I say, the brightest person in the whole film, cleverest. And I think that's fair enough. I mean, obviously all Trumpian people that vote Trump or in the Midwest or wherever aren't all stupid.
Well, no, and I think you're absolutely right. I'm pleased you said that, because in a sense it's very... I
don't agree with them.
No, exactly. I don't agree with them, and this is where I get a bit annoyed about the constant kind of, not Trump hate, but the hatred of people who find identification in whatever it is he represents.
And go no further.
Because I do think there's an element of, if you live in a democracy, the point of that democracy is that you embrace all hues of political persuasion and interest.
Absolutely.
And it might mean that you don't like your parents, and my grandparents were conservatives through and through.
Yeah.
We never agreed with them politically, but we loved them dearly.
Yes.
And I think in a sense this film was perhaps trying to say, look, there are times that even when you're a politically correct, woke-ish Democrat, embracing every myriad of every form, all of those kind of myriad of sophisticated kind of tolerances go out the window when you think you know someone as a deplorable.
Yes, exactly.
And I think it's asking even the left in America, the Democrats, to reevaluate that and say, before you just shoot everyone down. And then, of course, I mean, you can't get away from the fact that the whole film is obviously a commentary on gun law and guns.
Oh,
and
God, absolutely.
the prevalence of guns and the desire to hunt people.
Yeah. I mean, though, because you're taken with the main character, your sympathy goes to her, and in the end, you're given her as the heroine of the thing. And the Hilary Swank character, who one could say, well, she's as important or whatever. She doesn't really. We don't really have a final. Does she die in that exchange, in their final fight, or is she alive as well? Hilary Swank.
No, Hilary Swank dies at the end.
She dies. Yes, so we don't follow. But in a way, well, I suppose in that sense they are saying stick with the main character then.
But it's interesting because Trump saw the film as a threat. He didn't refer to it directly, but I think in a speech he issued a tweet on August the 9th calling liberal Hollywood racist at the highest level, writing the movie coming out is made in order to inflame and cause chaos. They create their own violence and then try to blame others. He didn't name the film, but that film was due to come out that day.
That seems extraordinarily articulate for Trump.
Well, it seems articulate for Trump, but at the same time, I don't think that's what the film's doing. I think what the film's trying to say, if it's saying anything, is we have to even be tolerant of Trump. People.
I think it is. I think it's saying everything is more complicated than, you can't just write things off.
No. Did you find it inventive? I mean, I think found it quite, it was inventive, wasn't it?
And it was another review.
I mean, it's a genre film.
Yeah, absolutely. And another review I read, sort of outside us, said that it thought itself funny, but it wasn't nearly funny enough. And I don't agree with that at all. I thought it was funny enough. I think it was. The bits that were funny were funny.
No, I agree. I think this is a film with great. All right, well, let's just summarise and give it our score. I mean, I'll go first. I went into this thinking it's just going to be really kind of like just, pulp fiction. It was just going to be chuck it out there, as I've said before, all those other kind of Blumhouse. I'm not saying it's the most sophisticated film out there.
No, it's very
unsophisticated. It absolutely isn't. It's not sophisticated at all. But it was really diverting, and it's the kind of film that would entertain you watching it on your Skybox for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And so on that level, and I think it did raise enough questions for it to lift it just above your standard sort of blow up your heads fodder.
Yeah.
There's nothing supernatural about it. It is extremely violent. So for anyone who's a bit sort of, I don't know, got the collie wobbles about that sort of thing, you can't watch it. But I thought it was kind of engaging, and it kept me entertained. And at the end of it, I was sort of, even if the fact that I was thinking, what is it trying to say? What is its point here?
Yeah.
Then it's done something more than just your average sort of horror schlock nonsense.
Yeah.
So if I was to score it out of 100, I'd probably give it about 70. 70 out of 100.
Within the
arc of a sort of genre film, it stood above. A load of old other shit. Nowhere near as good as something like Get Out. I mean, I think it was trying to do something on a par with Get Out, insofar as trying to be a little bit politically inquiring.
Yeah.
And I think it sits within that genre of Get Out films of what's going on in sort of political commentary within a sort of extremely violent setup.
It's interesting though, just talking to you now, just as we're doing this review, it suddenly makes me think. It wasn't of the quality of Us, but it makes me think in a way, when you get those incredibly violent deaths that are almost cartoon-like, that somehow and there's many in this film, is that almost dismisses it from the thing of a serious, because what the people who do, it just occurs to me, that's all, that people like the Us film, until the end, they keep their terrible sort of things very few and far between.
Yes,
whereas this sort of hits you in the face.
Yeah, this isn't
straight
ashamed
away.
to blow heads up in your face.
The best thing about this film was I loved the main character. I thought she grew on me tremendously.
Yeah, she was a cracking actress, wasn't she?
She was. She was sort
Betty Gilpin.
Betty Gilpin. I know that.
Betty Gilpin. Yeah, I don't recognise anything she's been in.
No, but she was sort of almost playing the part as if she was autistic. In the sense that she had a lot of facial tics.
Yes.
And her
she was a bit annoying at first, wasn't she?
She was. I thought she was going to be very annoying. And but somehow she brilliantly, and I don't know if it was in the writing, she wove her performance into that. And that added to it, I felt. I thought she was a very human person. She was the sort of person, for example, that would absolutely go to war for her country.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, and very clever with it.
Yeah.
It's a schlock horror in one sense, but it makes you work.
Yes,
you have to really think.
Yeah, it does.
Who is this?
Yeah.
What's that? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah, it pushes it back at you a bit, doesn't it?
Starts with a bang right from the beginning,
Sure,
which I always
does.
like. And nicely written, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I would give it, within its own terms, and that's what you mean, isn't it? I would give it exactly the same as you.
Would you?
Yeah,
70 out of
70.
100.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think within its own terms, that's probably as good as it can get.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, there you go. The Hunt. I would fully recommend watching it late at night with the older members of the family that can tolerate a lot of blood.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.